AI is everywhere, and I get it. There's a major FOMO going around to use AI to automate business tasks, especially the ones that feel like a grind, like social media content. But there's a problem. How do you avoid creating AI slobs? On this channel, I'm all about building practical AI that actually works. Not for everything, just the stuff that you hate doing. If you want to use AI for social media reels, here's my take. Start with your own content. You already have a running business. So you've got product photos, service images, something. The key to avoiding AI slop? Repurpose those existing content. Make small natural edits for variety. Add captions in your style, and this way, the output never feels 100% AI generated. Because it isn't. By the end of this n8n tutorial, you'll build a fully automated Reels generator that picks images from your database, animates them into natural-looking videos, overlays text, writes captions, and posts directly to multiple channels, without you lifting a finger. And as always, I'm doing this step by step with minimal technical jargon, so even a complete beginner can follow along. So let's dive right in. So this is the workflow that we're going to build today on n8n. And if you're completely new to n8n, I do recommend you going through one of my previous videos, which I'll link right up here and down in the description below, for just the foundational stuff around n8n so you can get started building the workflows. But generally, I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to build this. So even if you are a complete beginner, you should be able to follow along and get to the end of the workflow. So the workflow is going to start with a schedule trigger. So this is essentially specifying the time at which the workflow will be triggered. This is a specific time on a specific day, and that's going to kickstart the entire workflow. And the second step to the workflow is it's going to search a file, a specific Google Drive file. So in this case, I have the n8n folder 2 file. It's the same images that I uploaded in my previous video, but it still works the same way here. You know, we've got a picture of some products, basically stuff that you find in a typical cafe or coffee shop. So we are building this workflow presumably for a cafe or a coffee shop to market their services and product, right? So that goes into a code in JavaScript. So this is actually a randomizer. So what we're doing here is actually randomizing the file because we have these bunch of files or images that we want to pick at random, right? Because we don't want it to be the same. Ideally, you'd have more than 3 images here because then it will really randomize it better. But you know, this is just sort of running you through on how foundationally you can build this. So the next steps after the randomizer, it will upload the file in Blotato. The reason why we're uploading this is because we want it to be uploaded to a CDN or a content delivery network. So in layman's term, that's basically a platform which is publicly available where you can access the image. The reason why we're doing that is because if you're just providing a Google file folder URL, for example, this one right here, this is typically wonky when you're passing it through, you know, tools like Blotato because they are pretty selective in, you know, your URL, making sure that it could be publicly accessed. Also, when we're calling later on the image to video generation model, you will need a easily publicly accessible URL as well. So that's the reason why we're uploading it to Blotato, because it does provide the CDN or the platform basically to host that, right? So once you do that, the image is then publicly accessible. We will pass it then to a reel or idea prompt generator. So this is basically to generate the prompts to the image to video generation model. Essentially, this is the instruction for the model to generate the reels in the style and format that you want. And the next step to that is it's going to pass it on to a real idea and prompt generator. Over here, this is a simple AI LLM which generates the prompt, which is an instruction to the image to video generation model, telling it what kind of format, what kind of style that you want the reels to be generated in. And so the way that this particular AI agent is getting the context to your image, as you can see, it is a descriptive title that comes with the file. There are, of course, better ways to do this, where there's a mapping of the title of the image to the description of the image. Then we can have an agent actually go through that list to match the description to get the context to the image that it's getting, right? Because it can't technically see the image. But, you know, we're just trying to keep it slightly simple here, and we're just making a descriptive title. So it's going to infer from that title and generate the prompt for the image to video model. And then it gets passed on to the image to video model. In this case, we're using Wavespeed as one of the platforms. I've covered this in my previous videos before. There are, of course, other platforms like Key AI, FAL, a lot of other good ones as well, but they do all work pretty much the same way. So in this case, I'm sticking with Wavespeed. And then once you push it to the video generation model. You have to wait 30 seconds for it to complete the generation before pulling or getting the result, which is in this case the raw reel or the raw video. And this is just a logic gate to make sure that if it's not ready, it's going to go into a loop. It's going to wait another 30 seconds and try to get the result again. And then it comes down to a caption or a text overlay tool called SubMagic. So essentially this is responsible to overlay the text of the audio that comes with the reel and video. And again, same thing, you have to wait as it generates those overlay text before trying to fetch the result. And then that gets passed on to another logic gate, making sure that it goes in a loop. If it's not done, it tries to get it again. And then once it's done, it gets sent to an email via Gmail. And this is basically asking for approval from the human, make sure that everything is good before posting it into your social media. And there are two steps in posting it up to the social media. There's the upload media, which is not uploading to Instagram, TikTok directly yet. Again, this is also just uploading it to the CDN that we mentioned earlier, which is the Content Delivery Network, making sure that it is publicly accessible URL before pushing it to Instagram and TikTok and any other channels that you might want to post it in. And so if it's not approved at this node, it's going to go into a loop and go search for another file and randomize it and go through the whole process again. Cool. All right. So the very first node that we want to hit here is the trigger on schedule node. So we are going to have it run daily at 9 a.m. All right. And then we're just going to execute that node to populate it. And here the next node that I want to hit is the Google Drive node, right? And the operations that I want to select here is the search files and folder, because I want to search that particular folder that I specify. So I'm not going to change anything here, but what I'll do is toggle on the return all, because I want the list of all the files that are within the folder that I specify. So I'm going to pick add filter and I'm going to pick folder right here. And I'm going to pick by URL, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch the URL from the n8n folder 2 here that I have, which contains all my images. I'm just going to literally copy the URL over here and paste it into the field by URL. And I'm going to hit execute step, right? And as you can see, it's returning, if I toggle on to table, the list of all the items that are within the folder. All right, so now we've got the list. What we want to do is introduce a code node, right? And we're going to pick code in JavaScript. Now, even though n8n is a low code to no code tool, sometimes you do require some coding in between just to patch things over, to introduce operations like randomizer. So what we want to do is to randomize or pick at random from the list of images that we provided before, right? So, but don't worry, you don't actually have to code anything if you don't know how to. You can simply ask the AI, right? So in this case, I'm literally asking it, pick at random a file from the list. All right, so I'm going to generate the code here. All right, so it's giving me 4 lines of codes, and you don't really need to understand this, but if you want to, this is basically picking a random number between 0 to 1, and then it multiplies it by the length of the number of the files contained within the folder. So that means it is actually giving you a random file within the list. Then it defines that as the random file, and then it returns the ID and the name of the random file to you. All right, so let's run it to see if it's actually doing that. All right, so I'm going to hit execute step here. And as you can see, it's actually giving me back only one item now, which is the caramel glazed croissant to go with your coffee. But let's just execute the step again to see if it's actually randomizing, right? So there we go. It's Christmas spice hot chocolate. It's giving me another photos that's within the folder. And let's hit execute step again. Okay, that's the other one. All right, so let's just hit that again to see. Yep, it looks pretty random. Okay, cool. All right, so now this randomizer is working. So I'm going to call this node randomizer. All right, the next node that we want to hit is the upload to a CDN node. But in this case, I'm just going to use Blotato because that's the service that we're going to use later on down in the workflow anyway. So, it just makes sense to just use Blotato here. Of course, you can use any other services such as the S3 bucket, Cloudinary, many other services that will host a publicly accessible URL works as well. So, that's your choice. But because, like I said, we're already using Blotato, it just makes sense to use it. Now, what is Blotato? Blotato is an auto-scheduling tool. Although they have been creating new features that comes to the product, including creating images, reels, etc. directly on Blotato itself. But at the base level, it is a scheduling tool, an auto-scheduling tool that works very well with n8n. So what you want to do is to go to blotato.com and try it for free to just play around with it. And once you've created your account, it's going to take you to the dashboard that looks like this. And where you want to head to is actually go over to the settings here and connect your social accounts. As you can see, you've got LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all kinds of social accounts here. And I've connected my Automate with Mark Instagram here. I've not connected my TikToks yet, but it works the same way. It's pretty easy to connect just as long as you open it in the same browser that has login access with your Instagram, TikTok account. You're gonna be able to do that quite easily. Once you've connected that, where you want to go is to go over to the API section. This is where you want to get your API keys, and you'll see why that's important later on when we toggle back to the workflow. So I already have my API key created, so I can hit regenerate to regenerate API key. I'm not going to do that, but for you, if it's the first time, it's only going to say generate. And fair warning, the API key access is a paid feature, so the moment you hit generate or create the API key, the billing starts. And it's, I think, $29 a month for the starter pack. And if you're interested in using this tool, you can use my coupon code MARK20 for 20% off for the first 3 months, just to play around with it. But the actual value to it comes later on when you actually see the auto scheduling part come in the workflow. So going back to the workflow here, what I did was I typed in Blotato, and what I want to hit is the upload media to Blotato. And here, everything's already set up, but if you don't previously have a Blotato account set up, this will be blank. So you want to hit create new credential, and it's going to ask you for an API key, which is the key that you've just obtained practically from the copy API key right here, right? So just copy it over and hit save, and you're good to go. Okay, and we're going to leave the resource as media and operation as upload. In terms of media URL, this is where we want to upload the Google Drive URL, but the way we do that is, you can see we only have the ID here and not technically the URL, right? So how do we get the Google Drive URL for viewing? So the way you would do that is there is a specific format in which the URL works. It looks like this. So at a high level is drive.google.com/file/d/the ID, which is the one from here, right? /view, right? So that is the format. So this is basically the ID number that you want to drag, right, as a variable from here. Okay, so let me toggle that to expression. Okay, toggle it over here. Okay, so don't worry about taking any notes down, because I'm going to share the template for free down in the description below as soon as they're ready. But if you want to do it yourself, basically it's drive.google.com/file/d/the ID/view. All right, so remember just to replace the ID with the variable. All right, so I'm going to hit execute step here. And there we go. This is uploaded to basically the CDN of Blotato, which is the URL here, right? So if you were to copy this URL and open it in a new browser, you'll see that it is an image of that cup of coffee in the Blotato database. Cool. All right, so going back here, the next node that you want to hit is the real and prompt generator, right? So in this case, I'm just going to use an OpenAI node. And of course, there are many other LLMs that you can use as well, Claude, or you can even connect an agent to an OpenRouter account, and then you can keep switching your LLMs. But just to keep things simple here, I'm going to do a message model, pick the right OpenAI account here, and then from the model, I'm going to choose GPT 4.1 mini because maybe I just go with 4.1 because it is a prompt, so I want it to be quite detailed. So this is where we want to spend a bit of time making sure that there is a proper system prompt telling the agent what is its main role. So the difference between a system and a user prompt is that a system prompt is essentially the definition of what the agent is supposed to do. So in this case, it is a prompt generation agent. So we're going to tell it that. And because we want it to be good, I actually went to an LLM and asked it to generate a comprehensive prompt for this particular agent. So here you see you're an expert cinematic prompt engineer for image to video generation models. Examples are to video 3. You would receive a product image or an image title plus description. These are commercial product visuals. Your task is to generate a single highly optimized video prompt that transforms the image into an 8-second high-impact photorealistic marketing reel. All right, so these are just some of the guardrails that we put in place and, kind of the format that we want. Of course, if you want it to be production ready, spend a bit of time making sure that the system prompt is effective. As for the user prompt, it's essentially the prompt directly from the user and changes every run of the workflow. It's just the same way you would chat with ChatGPT on the interface. And because we already told the agent in the system prompt that it will receive a product image with a title and description, and these would be the commercial product visuals or the description of the product visuals. What we want to do in the user prompt is literally just tell it that this is the image name and description, and we're going to take basically the name and the title from the randomizer right here, which is the file that the randomizer picked at random. All right, so I'm gonna just drag that and drop it here. So that will constitute the description plus the title of the file so that it has context as to how to generate the prompt that will be most effective from the image to video generation model. So I'm gonna hit execute step here. All right, so as you can see, the output here is a steaming mug of luxurious Christmas spice hot latte, sits in a rustic wooden table topped with whipped cream, da-da-da. All right, some with audio, confident female, da-da-da. Okay, cool. Pretty happy with that prompt, so let's move ahead. Let me just rename this for clarity. So this is the prompt generator, okay. And then the next that we want to hit here is a HTTP request node. So a HTTP request node is basically a very useful node, especially when you want to connect it to an external third-party tools, in this case, a platform like Wavespeed. Blotato, before it introduces the community nodes that you saw earlier, that actually had to be connected through an HTTP node as well. So again, almost forgot, with the Blotato node, if you were to search on your node list and it doesn't show up, you need to go back to your admin panel right here to update it. So I'm not going to do that, but go over to admin panel and hit the gear icon. And once you're led to the settings, just update the n8n to the latest stable version and you should be able to see the community nodes. All right, so with the HTTP request, what you want to do here, let me rename this to Wavespeed post request. So this is to generate reels, okay. All right, so there are a bunch of fields that we need to fill in here, but the easiest way to get started is to go over to wavespeed.ai and get signed in, get signed up, and obviously you need to pay for these services because you are using the compute power to generate these these reels from the images. You know, it's the same with any other platform. I did notice that Key AI might be affordable in some of the models that are available there, but in terms of the mechanism, they work the same way. So on the dashboard, where you want to go is you want to go to Explore, right? And then under the models, you want to search, or rather click on View All Models. And here we can filter it to image to video, right? It's because Wavespeed has got a bunch of models that they support. So in this case, I want to use actually a VO3 model or VO 3.1, right? And then we're just going to pick VO 3.1 fast image to video. Okay, and then where you want to head to is the API section over here. And there is a curl command that you can copy. And you don't really need to know how to code to use these curl commands. You can copy the entire chunk right here and go back to your n8n node and just copy the entire chunk here and hit import, right? And once you do that, it actually populates all the fields that were previously empty. And we'll go through each of these fields later on. Right? Under authentication, here's what we want to do. So in order to use Wavespeed services, you need some kind of authentication so that Wavespeed knows it's actually you and which account to charge it to. So in order to do that, you actually have to use generic credential type as the authentication and pick header auth as the auth type. And here I already have my account set up with Wavespeed, so it's called Wavespeed Tryout API Key. But if you haven't, just hit create credential. And there are two fields that you need to fill in, which is the name and the value. In order to get these, you want to go back to the API section here. And as you can see, the H is the header part, and this is where the authentication happens, right? So when they say name, that means the name of the key. So in this case, it's authorization. So I'm going to copy that and go back to my workflow on my note, and the name's authorization. Meanwhile, the value is actually bearer and the API key. So I'm going to copy this, go back here, and copy bearer. I'm going to toggle this to expression so you can see. So bearer space, the entire API key. And where do you get the API key? Well, you want to go over to the API key section here, open it in a different tab, and there it goes. If you don't have an API key created, you want to hit create key, Wavespeed demo. Okay, so I'm just going to create that key right here, and then I'm going to copy it once, and now I'm toggling back to my instance here and copy the entire API key so that I can start using this. So I'm going to use Wavespeed and n8n key. All right. So I'm going to name that key that. I'm going to hit save. So of course I'm going to revoke this key right after this recording. Do take note that do not expose your API key, in a public forum or share it with anyone unless you want that person to start being able to have access to your Wavespeed platform. All right. So now that header auth is Wavespeed and n8n key, because we've already set it up here, we can actually toggle off the send headers portion here because now we don't need to send the headers part. It's already wrapped up in this section right here. And the beauty is the next node, when we need to actually pull for the result, we can use back the same account that we've set up here. So under body, you can see that these are the details or specifications to the reels that you want to generate. So aspect ratio 9:16 is great for Instagram, TikTok Shorts. Duration is 8 seconds, which is great. And then there's generate audio. We wanted to generate audio because under the prompt, we actually have audio script for it to read. And this is where we want to upload the image, right? So this is the image we want Wavespeed to work based off to generate the reel. So here, how do we get the image URL? We want to go over to the previous Blotato node and just drag the URL variable, drop it over here, right? So this is, if you recall, the image URL, the publicly available image URL that we've uploaded into the CDN of choice, right? Once you drop that in under the prompt, this is basically the prompt that we're gonna pass on to Wavespeed. Let me just open that up. So this is the prompt that's coming from the prompt agent. I'm gonna drag that and just drop it over there. Resolution 1080 is good for me, and all looks good. I'm gonna hit execute step and try it out. Okay, so it's successfully being sent over, and now we just gotta wait because it takes time for the image to video generation model to actually generate the reels or the videos because it takes some compute. While we wait for that, actually we want to introduce the wait 30 seconds node. The reason why we want to wait 30 seconds is because it takes time, so we don't want to immediately ask for or try to get the results, right? And I'm going to hit execute step here. So it just runs the node and the data gets populated. And while we're waiting for the wait node, we can actually introduce the next HTTP request node, and this is to get result from Wavespeed, right? So after we wait 30 seconds, we want to get the results. So for the URL from where we can get the result, we want to go back to Wavespeed, and again under the API section, scroll down to the get result polling section. So there are two parts. As you can see, this is the check status curl. So this is a command to actually check the status, and this is a command to actually get the results. So in this case, we're just gonna try to get the result, right? So we're gonna copy this whole chunk, right? And go back to import curl. It's actually just one URL, but for the sake of it, let's just copy the whole thing. And here you can see that there is a placeholder called request ID, and we're gonna replace that, toggle this to expression. We're gonna replace that with the ID that's coming from the post node or the wait 30 seconds node, which are the same thing. If you see that this is the request ID that's being passed on to the 30-second node, this is basically the ID of the reel that's been generated. So in this node, we're trying to get the result. We're telling Wavespeed, hey, get me back the reels that you've created, but Wavespeed doesn't know which particular reels that you're talking about or videos that you're talking about, so you need to provide the ID, right? And of course, once you're requesting that, it will also be asking for your authentication. In this case, we already set it up previously, so it's going to be generic credential type, header auth, and I believe it was called Wavespeed and n8n key, right? So I've got a bunch of keys set up there. Probably need to do housekeeping. We can toggle off the headers now and basically hit execute step because there's nothing else. It's just us trying to get the result back. It's successful and the status is actually completed. All right, so the next node we want to add here is actually the if node, and the reason why we are doing this is because with the get node, the status will not always going to be completed, right? So sometimes it may be processing, sometimes it may be some other stuff. So you want to make sure that it doesn't go to the next node unless it's completed, which is why we want to have an if node where we say only when the status is completed that it goes to the next node. And meanwhile, if it's not completed, we want it to loop back to wait another 30 seconds to get the result again until, such time that it's completed, then it goes to the next node, right? So we're going to run this. And usually when you loop it, it's going to rerun these few nodes. And when you're trying out such workflows, it is recommended that you start pinning some of these data over here because sometimes when you're introducing loops into the workflow, it could restart the entire execution. And if you have nodes that actually, cost a few bucks to run, that's going to eat up your budget if you run it a couple times. So we're going to pin this and pin the data here. So what we're doing is essentially we are making sure that on all the test runs, these data actually stay within the node, right? So I'm going to pin this as well. Okay. And if node can't be pinned because it's just true false. All right, so this is going into, as you can see, it is going into the true branch because it is completed. So here, just to note, also with the get result, you actually get the URL of the reel that's been generated, right? So let's check out this URL and it will download basically the reels that are being generated. We just want to check out what it looks like.
Wrap your hands around the magic of Christmas in every sip.
Okay, all right, so that is the reel that's been generated. And okay, as you can see, there are no text overlays. So while it's great for reels right now, we do want the additional text that goes over just in case that people are scrolling without any volume, they can actually still read it, right? So in this case, what we want to do is actually introduce another tool here called SubMagic, right? So this is SubMagic post request. What SubMagic is, it is a tool that overlays text on top of reels. So, for people who are on Instagram and TikTok, if they're scrolling without volume, they'll actually be able to read the text too. It will infer what you're saying in the audio and basically automatically overlay the text. So you can log in and try it for free. And if you think it's going to work for you and you want to take it for a spin, you can use my coupon code Automate with Mark for 10% off SubMagic and see if you like it. All right. So if you create an account, log in, you'll be led to this dashboard where you can actually go over to the API documentation. And once you hit that, under the introduction section, you can scroll all the way down to the example request here and copy the whole curl chunk here that will look familiar to you by now because it's the same of what we did in Wavespeed. And then go back to your n8n workflow and basically import the entire curl command right here, right? So there's a post, URL, and again, the same thing under authentication, we want to give it a generic credential type and header auth. You need to tell SubMagic who you are with the account. So here, you want to create a new credential if this is your first time. So SubMagic key account and then demo, call it that. Okay. And under name, if you were to go back to the documentation, you'll see that the name now is actually x-api-key. So we're going to copy that. And there's no bearer anymore. So when you go back to your account here, you can paste the name, which is x-api-key, and value is literally just your API key, right? And how do you get these API key? Go back to your SubMagic dashboard, hit manage API key here under integration, and basically you can generate the key, right? So mine was already generated previously, so I'm going to hit regenerate key so you guys can see it. All right, so these are the new API key. I'm going to copy that. Of course, I'll revoke it after this recording. But I just want to show you how it's all done, right? So I'm going to toggle this to expression and just paste the entire API key right here and hit save. Okay, so I'm going to close that. And now these are all set up. I can actually toggle off my send headers the same way I did with Wavespeed. And under the body, you'll see that there are titles, which is my first video. So I'm going to call it my daily short instead. All right, so language is English, video URL. This is the URL of the reel that was generated by Wavespeed. So I'm going to drag it from here and drop it in the value. Okay. Template name is basically the font, what it looks like. So right now it's Hormozy 2. You can go in and tweak it to other types of fonts and stuff like that, but I'm not going to do that here. And I'm just going to hit execute step, right? Okay, so now it's sending over to SubMagic and it's doing the text overlay. And this workflow is getting a little bit long, so I am going to just move it over here. And of course, with any long-running request, we want it to wait a certain amount of time. So in this case, it's going to be wait 30 seconds. You can hit execute step, so it populates the data. And while that's waiting, we can set up the next node, which is the HTTP request. In this case, the get node. Right, so we want to get the result now of the video with the overlaid caption from SubMagic. So going back to SubMagic's documentation, so you actually would refer to the side panel here. You see there's a get project section. So once you get there, there's a curl command that you can copy. Again, it's just one URL link here, but I'm just going to copy the entire thing. And here, same thing, we're going to do import URL or import curl and paste everything in. And as you can see, these are the project IDs. Similar to what we did with Wavespeed, we need to tell it which project to pull from, right? So this is the ID that we're going to drag from the previous node. Again, I need to toggle that to expression before I could do that. So drop the ID right here, right? So authentication, we're going to use the exact same authentication from earlier, which is the SubMagic key account and then a demo. And then once we do that, we can toggle off the send headers. And that's pretty much it because we are just trying to get the result from SubMagic, right? And rename this SubMagic get result. Okay, so I'm gonna hit execute step here. All right, there we go. There are some outputs with the description, direct URL, etc. Okay, cool. Since that's completed, there's no problem. But again, just to make sure that we're covering our bases, if the request has not been completed, that it doesn't just go to the next node and cause an error, we want to drag the status variable over here and only allow the status, or rather the workflow, to continue if it's actually completed, right? So execute step here. Of course, it goes to the true branch because it has been completed, but just in case it doesn't, we want to wait for another 30 seconds and try to get it again. And I'll just quickly rerun it before I move to the next flow. All right, cool. So that's all done. The next node now we want to introduce here is the Gmail node. The reason why we want to introduce the Gmail node, we want it to be a human in the loop system where you actually ask for approval. So you're done with generating the reels, you're done with generating the captions over the reel. Now it's just sending it to the user to ask for his or her approval to see if it's good to post right up to the social channels, right? Because you don't want it to be automated all the way through without your approval or without you checking or reviewing it. So that's why we want to introduce a guardrail here where it checks with you and sends you the completed output on Gmail. In this case, of course, this could be Telegram, this could be WhatsApp, this could be Slack, any platform that you prefer. But here, we're just going to use Gmail, and the operation is send and wait for a response. Here, I'm going to send it to my email, automatewithmark@gmail.com. And subject is going to be daily short approval. And message, this is going to be, all right, we're going to craft this and say reel and caption, right? So caption is essentially what goes, sorry, let me just toggle this expression so that I can drag it in. So caption is essentially what goes under, your TikTok or your Instagram reel as a description to the reel. So meanwhile, the actual file of the reel, we can do instead of a download URL, which you can provide that too, I would actually prefer to take the preview URL, which gives you an option to actually make changes if you like, right? So under response type, I'm gonna pick approval, that's correct, but I wanna add an option here, make sure that I can approve and disapprove, and I'm gonna leave everything else as is for now. So I'm gonna hit execute step, and then we're gonna go over to my email to check what it looks like. So here's what I receive in my inbox. Essentially an approval email. The title is Daily Short Approval, and here's a link to the reel, which we can preview, and these are the captions. So if I hit the link to the preview, this is what is showing me on a SubMagic preview dashboard, and I can play it. Essentially the reel that we've generated with the caption overlay or the text overlay and the caption that goes along for the posting to Instagram, TikTok, or whatnot, right?
Wrap your hands around the magic of Christmas in every sip.
Okay, so that is the reel that's generated with the caption. There are some cuts that VO3 made, so it's not perfect, and typically you would then reject this and ask it to regenerate again. But in this case, we're just gonna say okay and move forward. Of course, there are a lot more work that probably needs to be done on the prompt side just to make sure that it doesn't do this. It's all about iterating the process when you work with AI generated content. But of course, having an image base to work out of would make it a lot easier. We can make it a lot more natural than just purely 100% AI generated content. So I'm just gonna pretend that this is okay for me to go ahead, and I'm gonna hit approve so that we can move forward with the workflow. So it says got it, thanks. So going back to the note here, it says that approve true. All right, so if the approval is rejected, it will actually say false. So we're gonna have an if gate where we say, hey, if this is true, then only then move ahead. Otherwise, we're gonna ask it to go all the way back over here where it search another file and randomize it and pick something else. So here we're ready to move ahead to actually upload it to, again, before directly on Instagram and TikTok, we need to upload it to a CDN of choice, content delivery network, so that it becomes a publicly available URL. So in this case, we're gonna do upload to Blotato node again, which is the same node that we did previously. And essentially the media URL now, the difference is we're gonna take this from the previous if nodes where it contains the direct URL. This could be a bit confusing sometimes. There is a download URL and there is a direct URL. You can think of it like having a view URL or a download URL. You know how in Google Drive, there's one URL where it just immediately lets you download the file, and then there's another which actually opens up a page where it lets you view the image. So in this case, we want the one that lets us view the image, which is the direct URL. So we're gonna drag this direct URL and drop it over here. So we're gonna hit execute step. And so you can see now this is uploaded to a publicly available URL to view the reel. So just to be sure, you can open that up in a new page and you'll see that it's actually the reel that we had, right? So going back here, the last note or the last 2 notes, or 3 or 4, depending on how many social channels you want to post onto, is actually just the Blotato notes, where it is now a create post. So in this case, with the Blotato account that you've created previously, you can just use the same account and resources post, create the platforms that you have on there, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. So I already have Instagram. I'm going to pick from the list, automate with Mark. And the text is actually the description of the reel, which is a caption, right? So in this case, the text, I want it to say the description right here. And of course, if you don't like what SubMagic's generated, you can change that as I've shown early on, or you can actually introduce a different agent to just generate a caption for you, but it might be an overkill. So media URL, again, we want to use the media URL that have been generated by Blotato. Now that is a publicly available URL, all right? So we're going to hit execute step here, and then we're going to check on my Instagram page to see what it looks like, right? So submission ID means it's successfully submitted or posted on my Instagram. So going into my Instagram page, you can see that this is now uploaded, the reel that we saw.
Wrap your hands around the magic of Christmas in every sip.
So as you can see, these are the captions that went on with the post, and it was posted 21 seconds ago. So it all works as expected. And I'm just going to delete this because this is not what I intended to post. Okay, and of course, if you have more than one channels that you want to post through Blotato, like your TikTok or LinkedIn, you can simply add another Blotato create posts. And here, all right, now we're going to connect it here. We want to connect it to the previous upload to Blotato. We're going to branch it out this way. And you can have multiple branches, right? It's going to run every branch basically, top to bottom. So here we might say, all right, let me just rename that so it's clear. So this is Instagram post or post to Instagram. And this one, I would say post to TikTok, right? And then here you would choose your, platform, which is TikTok. And because I've not connected my TikTok account, there's no list here. And last but not least, how much do all of these cost? Well, there are a couple of costs involved here. The big ones are, of course, the Blotato subscription, which is at $29 a month on the starter. And for SubMagic, the Pro is at $23 a month. And for Wavespeed, for an 8-second video, that's about $1.20, which is not too affordable in my opinion if you're doing it on a daily basis. So you might want to explore other platforms or other models that may be cheaper per run. But you'll be looking at a monthly cost of about $29 plus $23 plus whatever that you're spending per reel. So if you're spending $1 per reel, and that's going to be $5 per week and $20 a month, and then plus all the costs of running the agent, connecting it to GPT, etc., you're probably looking at about $80 to $90 a month to automate this entire thing. But if you do it well and make sure that the prompting's on point, this might save you thousands of dollars by taking away some of the resources that you might need to have a full-time social media person looking over everything. Not to say that you shouldn't still have a social media person, you absolutely still need that, but it'd be great to have the social media person be able to, instead of posting and doing all the manual work and coming up with the ideas, but actually just maintaining the automation, reviewing it when needed, and basically being the maintainer and the master of these automations. So that's it. That's the step-by-step tutorial as to how you could put something like this together. If you have any questions along the way, please comment down below. And of course, if you find contents like these valuable to you, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one.